And good morning again. We welcome to the broadcast the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell. Senator McConnell, Jim Baker, the former Secretary of State who led 5 Republican presidential campaigns, described this recent brawl over trying to tie the defunding of Obamacare to shutting down the U.S. government. He described it by recalling the words of a long ago candidate who lost a Senate race in Texas, who said, "We shot ourselves in the foot and then reloaded." Will you ever let something like this happen again?
You know, one of my favorite old Kentucky sayings is there's no education in the second kick of a mule. The first kick of the mule occurred back in 1995 when the Republican House shut down the government. Look, shutting down the government, in my view, is not conservative policy. I don't think a 2-week paid vacation for federal employees is conservative policy. A number of us were saying back in July that this strategy could not and would not work, and of course it didn't. So there'll not be another government shutdown. You can count on that.
Well, how badly do you think the country was hurt by all of this?
Well, it certainly didn't do the country any good to have, both a government shutdown and a pending fiscal crisis right on top of it. But look, we're a big, resilient country. You just pointed out how the stock market bounced back immediately. I was pleased to play a role in keeping us from going to the brink. I think it was important to do the right thing for the country, and we did.
While people here were giving you credit for being the one who was able to get together with the Democrats and broker this deal, back in your home state of Kentucky, the Tea Party folks went nuts. I mean, you are going to have a Tea Party candidate opposing you in the Republican primary. Say they are now more determined than ever to beat you. They even accused you of taking a kickback. They said that in this legislation there is a provision that provides a way to get $2 billion to fund a dam project in Kentucky. What is that all about?
Well, as it has been widely reported, it was a provision requested by the President and the Corps of Engineers and suggested by a senator from Tennessee and a senator from California that actually saves the taxpayers $160 million. Rarely in a spending bill do you have a provision that saves $160 million for the taxpayers.
But did you have anything to do with putting that into this legislation?
It was put in by Senator Alexander and Senator Feinstein, senators from Tennessee and California, because it saved $160 million for the taxpayers.
Well, you have lobbied for that project before. I mean, it is a Kentucky project.
In past years, it's a dam that sets in the important inland waterway passage between the Mississippi and the Ohio. It's been a long-standing project. It doesn't just benefit Kentucky, it benefits the whole inland waterways system. It is extremely important to the commerce that flows down the central part of the United States, yes.
Let me ask you about Senator Ted Cruz. He led this effort to tie the defunding of Obamacare to shutting down the government. He said he is not backing away. He says he will continue to do, and these are his words, anything he can to stop what he calls the train wreck that is Obamacare. How are you going to deal with that?
Well, I certainly agree with Senator Cruz that Obamacare is indeed a train wreck. I mean, a visit to the website is kind of like a trip to the Department of Motor Vehicles in your state. People can't, even if they can access the website, there's no way to get quotes. Even those who may be fortunate enough to sign up are going to find that the premiums are higher and the choices are fewer. One thing that all Republicans agreed on back in 2009 is that we thought Obamacare was a terrible mistake for the country. We still think that, and we're going to do everything we can in the future to try to repeal it. But that requires a Republican Senate and a different president. We have a math problem in the Senate in getting rid of Obamacare. It's the following math problem: 55 Democrats and 45 Republicans. We only control a portion of the government, and so that limits our ability to get rid of this horrible law.
But let me get back to what do you do about Senator Cruz? How do you deal with him? Trent Lott, your predecessor, the very conservative Republican from Mississippi, was asked by the Washington Post, and he said, you got to roll them. He said, we've got to have more pushback against these people who come to Washington and suddenly announce they have all the answers. When Senator Cruz tries this again, how will you respond to that?
Look, we've got a big conference with 45. I'd like to have 51. That would make me the majority leader instead of the minority leader. We have a lot of people with different points of view. We had some tactical differences about how to get at the repeal of Obamacare, but the fact that we have some tactical differences doesn't mean we don't all share the same goal. Obamacare is the worst piece of legislation that's been passed in the last half century. The single biggest step in the direction of Europeanizing our country. We need to get rid of it. And if the American people will give us a majority in the Senate and a new president, that's exactly what we're going to do.
I have to tell you that the White House, as late as last night, was telling me that one of the reasons for all these problems with this website is that it has been overwhelmed with people that want this insurance. And they're saying that they are enrolling people into this program, and that, like all new programs, the glitches will have to be worked out.
Well, let me quote Robert Gibbs, the president's former press secretary, who said it's excruciatingly embarrassing for the administration. In Oregon, no one has signed up. In Alaska, 7. They've had 3 or 4 years here to get this ready. God only knows how much money they've spent, and it's a failure. The government simply isn't going to be able to get this job done correctly. And even if you were lucky enough, Bob, to get on, to sign up, you're going to find you got fewer choices and higher premiums. This is a very bad deal for the American people.
You have primary opposition. You have Tea Party people who now say you're a public enemy #1. It seems to me, though, this is something that goes beyond Mitch McConnell and the right side of the Republican Party in Kentucky. Are we seeing a war now for the soul of the Republican Party?
Well, just let me say this about the primary in Kentucky. I've endured millions of dollars of attack ads that have been calling me a right-wing fanatic over the years. I think that my opponents in the primary are going to have a hard time convincing Kentucky primary voters that I'm some kind of liberal. I enjoy the support of the most famous Tea Party senator in America, Rand Paul. I'm supported by Marco Rubio, Pat Toomey, 2 other Tea Party favorites who were elected in 2010. I have the support of Mike Huckabee and Bill Bennett. I think they're going to have a hard time convincing Kentucky primary voters that Mitch McConnell is some kind of liberal. In fact, we took a poll last month to check that out, and only 2% of Kentuckians thought I was a liberal. So I think that's a pretty hard sell, and it's almost certainly going to fail.
What do you want now from President Obama? What do you want him to do now? You're facing the same problems that caused this government shutdown. What would you like the president to do now, Senator?
Well, my first choice would be to take advantage of the opportunity presented by divided government. Divided government has frequently done very, very important things. I think of Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill raising the age for Social Security, which saved Social Security for a generation. I think of Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill doing the last comprehensive tax reform. I think of Bill Clinton in a Republican Congress doing welfare reform and actually balancing the budget multiple years in the late 90s. Divided government is actually an opportunity to tackle tough stuff. And we all know the unsustainable growth rate of entitlements is the single biggest challenge confronting America's future. If we don't fix that, we're not going to leave behind for our children the same kind of country our parents left behind for us. I wish President Obama would lead and take advantage of the opportunities presented by divided government.
How are the
Honestly,
first,
Bob, I don't expect.
What are the first steps
Honestly,
in doing that? Do you want him to call you on the phone? Do you want him to set up some kind of a meeting? Do you want it let it be settled up there on the Hill? Because even some Democrats say the president has not been active enough in this fight. Would you like more contact with him, or is that a waste of time?
Well, we've talked about this. What I'd like for him is to step up to the plate and do it. Unfortunately, every discussion we've had about this in the past has had what I would call a ransom attached to it, $1 trillion in new tax revenues. Look, we don't have this problem because we tax too little in this country. We have it because we spend too much. We currently have a $17 trillion national debt, and that pales in comparison to what's coming our way if we don't make the eligibility for entitlements fit the demographics of America today and tomorrow. Do I expect this kind of presidential leadership in the near future? Honestly, no. But let me say what I do expect to come out of the next episode that we'll have in January and February. We have, as a result of the Budget Control Act, which was passed in 2011, which the president signed and was supported on a bipartisan basis, actually reduced government spending for 2 years in a row for the first time since right after the Korean War. It is reducing government spending. Our Democratic friends want to bust the caps, in other words, spend more, and they want to raise taxes. For me, the bottom line when we re-engage early next year is I don't want to bust the caps and I don't want to raise spending because we are, in fact, reducing government spending. Well, not as much as we need to, but it is a success.
But wouldn't it be a good idea maybe to start re-engaging before early next year to try to lay some groundwork for that? I mean, have you given any thought to calling the president, or if he called you, would you take the call? I mean, what happens right now?
Oh, yeah,
what ought to happen right now?
Well, what's happening right now is there is a budget conference with Paul Ryan and Patty Murray, and they're going to see if they can come up with a proposal. Look, we interact with the White House whenever they would like to. My preference would still be a big deal, but let me say at a minimum, we ought not to bust the caps that are actually reducing government spending, and we ought not to raise taxes. At a bare minimum, it seems to me that's the best way to go forward as we go into the discussions that we will have in January and February.
All right. Well, Senator, I want to thank you very much for coming out and talking to us this morning. We appreciate it.